Alright, welcome back guys to this tier list here for the Duelist Cup. We have the Duelist Cup. First stage is already here, second stage is coming, and we are ranking all the decks, or all the most meta relevant decks in the categories. The best, obviously the best of all decks that you can play right now. Then we have the strong option, the mid option, and these decks I would avoid. We have Goblin Biker here. Goblin Biker obviously will be better once there is a good XYZ deck in the meta. Right now there is no good XYZ deck in the meta. I wouldn't particularly say avoid, but it's a very mid option, which is just power crept by the better decks. We have this Inferno deck, which I think is an avoid option here, just not strong, just no solid game plan that the deck has, unfortunately, so I wouldn't take this to this tournament. I think Pearly is another mid option here. Being able to build the Towers monster can sometimes be good, but Pearly is an old deck in Gänsefüßen, sagt man in Deutschland, Gänsefüßen jetzt in Germany, but not quite sure how it is in English, but it's not really an old deck, but it's just not that powerful anymore. But the Towers monster can definitely sometimes win you games, especially because not a lot of decks are running outs to these towers, but you will nevertheless have a hard time. This is not only is this deck strong, but also will it be easy to like accrue wins with this deck in the first and second stage of the Duelist Cup. We have Vanadium, which is not super bad, but there are just way better combo decks out there. I mean, if you only have access to Vanadium, sure, but otherwise I wouldn't go for that. Same as with Ritual Beast. This was a very good deck, but definitely not at its best point right now. Also Shifter is at 1 now. We don't have this super clear everything is fire, everything is dark option where you can just play your Protoss, so I wouldn't particularly go for it. I think it's better than, for example, Vanadium, and now that I have to think about this, I think that Purdy might be better than Goblin Biker. We have Sky Striker, which definitely want to play as a going second variant, and I think this is kind of a mid option. That's definitely not bad. Going second can be nice. Then again, we have a very strong going first meta, so you will need impactful going second cards. I think combining this with Tenpai could be better than just playing it poorly, and just playing it poor, but I think this is better than the decks that we have listed here. Then we have Traptrix, obviously power crept by Labyrinth, no big surprise here. I would generally say avoid this deck, not as much as Infernoid though. Then we have Yubel Fiendsmith, obviously a very strong option. We will have to see whether this also will fit in the best category. I think this deck has some bad problems, especially going second. It's not that great. Sometimes you have this option of just crashing into your opponent's monsters for a game, but then again, it's not the best, and there are just decks out there that do what Jubel does, but better. It will become, or it will be in the end, one of the stronger options, that's for sure, but I think it can't be in the best category. We have Centurion, definitely one of the stronger synchro decks right here, and will either be at the top of the mid category or at the bottom of the strong category. Unfortunately, we have still not yet received the support, which is why this deck is still waiting for its ultimate power spike. We have Heroes, and Heroes, I think it's somewhere at the bottom of the mid section here. I would prefer it over Vanadium, to be honest, but that's basically it. Has not really received anything meaningful in the last packs, and the time of Heroes is definitely gone. This is a rogue option. You can definitely take this to the Duelist Cup and reach the maximum level, that's for sure. Then we have Super Heavy Samurai. I would say at this point, avoid this deck. Has been hit a bit too hard, and the time for Super Heavy Samurai has definitely passed. Then again, not as bad in my opinion as these other options we have right here. Telements honestly is not that bad, and combined with the Fiendsmith engine could be ending up on the bottom of our strong category here. Telement you always have to basically calculate in. This also depends on how many decks with Bestials you see when you are playing. Obviously, if there are more Bestials, then you want to avoid your Telements deck. Otherwise, this can be very strong. Branded Despia also a strong option. I would honestly, and this depends a bit on the player, I would say. If we have a really good Branded Pilot, then I think this is one of the best decks. Otherwise, this is a strong option, but you do have to play it, or you have to be able to play it good. The same goes for Telements, so I think this is in this category, but I think Branded is better than is Telements. We have Light Swan. I would avoid this deck. Doesn't really do anything super special. T is definitely the better Light Swan deck, if you want to call it that, so I would generally avoid it. Same goes, unfortunately, I have to say, at the moment for Memento, definitely still waiting on its new power creep, its new support here, the Fiendsmith and also the Aerial Eater. are definitely helping the deck, but for now it's just not that great. Its time will come, but it is not right now. We have Rescue Ace that you can also combine with Amina cards, for example, with Fiendsmith. Definitely not in a bad position, will end up somewhere here at the bottom of the strong category, even though I personally do not really like this deck. We have Salamangreat, which is a solid mid option. I would put it somewhere here, maybe, yeah, let's say under or over Ritual Beast and under Goblin Biker. Has an advantage of not having like dark monsters or light monsters, so the Bestials don't do anything against this deck, which is nice, but other than that, nothing too special. We have a Dragon Link here, which definitely, if it can achieve its end board, can be very strong. Playing a second into a deck is okay-ish. We can play a lot of Bestials, that is kind of nice, so I think this is here in the mid category. If I would need to pick a deck to reach the top of the Duelist Cup, I guess I would put Sky Striker, or I would play Sky Striker over Dragon Link. Then we have Ancient Gear going second decks, definitely not in the worst position, but Ancient Gear is the worst of them all. So for me, this is definitely an avoid. Then again, it's the best of all the avoid decks we have right here, because these going second decks with their very unfair cards can definitely win games. We have the Chimera Fiendsmith variant. This is actually quite solid, and in my opinion, might be at the top of the mid category in the end. We have Laundries, definitely a deck that I would avoid. The time of Laundries is long over, and even though we have Empen, I think back at 2, you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here, this deck isn't it. We have Kashtira, and Kashtira Stun is a deck that I have seen a lot recently. Definitely a very solid choice. I would place this at the top of the mid category. Then we have Unchained, which you can now combine with the Fiendsmith engine. That is quite nice, even though Jubel Fiendsmith, where you also play a little Unchained package, is definitely better. Still not an unsolid deck, but not great into Fuvalos, not great into Maxi, which can be very important for making a deck solid. So I think Unchained I would play over something like Dragon Link, but this might also be personal preference. I will put it here in the middle of the mid category. We have Exosister, not a bad deck by any stretch of the imagination, but also not the greatest deck of all times. Definitely has some power boost with the new Tachyon card, but then again the game plan is no longer that solid, and Shifter is at 1, which was definitely a good advantage point of this deck. We have the Dinosaurs, if they can resolve their Triceratops Dino, where then nothing can interact with the Dino deck anymore, can definitely be quite nice. Other than that, nothing too fancy here, nothing too special, and a deck I would generally avoid, have to be honest. Not the greatest deck at the moment. We have Sprite with the Swap Frog, I think it's Swap Frog, going to 3, definitely nice, and a good power boost for Sprite. Definitely a mid deck here. The board that this deck can build was very impressive in the past, is not that impressive right now, but definitely better than some of the other options that we have available right here. We have the Marincess deck, which I would honestly avoid. No real reason to play Marincess at the moment, unfortunately. The Samurai Beetle represents Rika, or Rika, which is a deck that I would say hovers somewhere here at the bottom of the mid category. Definitely can be strong if you can go first and build up your entire board, but going second, this deck is very, very bad. The engine cannot really play into anything else. Obviously, you can play quite a considerable amount of hand traps and non-engine. That is quite nice, but definitely the going second element makes it not great at the moment. We have Vanquish Soul, which honestly also with Shifter going to 1 and the fact that the meta is quite fast, I would at the moment avoid. It is not a bad deck by any means, but I think it's not well positioned in the current meta. We have Labyrinth, which I think is a solid option. I would put it at the top of the mid category here. Obviously, the biggest problem of Labyrinth is going second. You might need to run something like evenly matched, but you then would probably need even more. But what you can do is play the Arias, the Labyrinth Butler, with, for example, the Daruma Karma Cannons, and then maybe you have the ability to play on your opponent's turn, flip something something face down, this can be quite impactful. And obviously, if you go first and have a lot of these power traps, this can also be very, very strong. We have Fire King here. This would be Fire King with the Asamina package. I think this is actually a pretty strong deck. We are not seeing this a lot right now. In my opinion, it is better than Yubel. I would say it's close though, but we are also very resistant against the Bestials. Obviously, they can do something against the Asamina stuff, but the Asamina engine is definitely not as hard hit by the Bestials than, for example, Fiendsmith would be. So I think even though we don't see a lot of Fire King Asamina right now, or maybe pure Fire King even, with the Snake Eyes package, I think this is still one of the best decks and a bit of a sleeper pick. We have Mavmech here. Mavmech, always kind of solid, and in my opinion, somewhere here at the top of the mid category, we still have the entire combo intact. Diameter at 1 doesn't really change anything, so Mavmech still solid, even though we are playing light monsters and dark monsters, which is not great against the Bestials. One of the best decks, no surprise here, is Tenpai Dragon. This is not only because this deck still is very, very strong. You can incorporate a Fiendsmith engine in here, not because of the Fiendsmith boss monster, but just because the Fiendsmith engine can get you into your Tenpai plays via the Promethean Princess and the Beatrice. You can send Chandra, your one Chandra. You can send Pyra if you wanted to. You can also send the Green Dragon if you need him, or the Genroku, depending on what exactly you need on the field. So super strong also, and this is a big upside for this deck, and I think this deck might be the best at this. This deck just is playing games at a fast pace, so you can very early on see whether you might be able to stop your opponent if you go second, and then you might like just surrender the game and go next. The games with Tenpai can stretch a bit sometimes, but in general the games are quite fast, so this is another bonus point for this deck in this Duelist Cup. But Tenpai, yeah, still a super strong option, can play a lot of non-engine, going second, a lot of hand traps, and that is exactly what you need in this format to stop the opponent's decks. For the Raid Raptor deck, I think it's kind of like the same with Pearly here, can establish a very unbreakable board if it can go through. I think it's easier to do it with Pearly than it is with Raid Raptor. Stopping Raid Raptor is a bit easier than Pearly. Pearly has different kind of ways to reach the X-Pearly Noir, where Raid Raptor can be stopped with one Imperm or one Effect Veiler on the Raiders Knight, if you don't make it with this one Raid Raptor bird guy, but you don't always have him. So we have the Red Dragon Archfiend deck. Avoid this deck, it's just not powerful enough at the moment. Definitely not something I would take to the Duelist Cup. We have Sword Soul, and unfortunately I also have to say I would avoid this deck because I mean, it's still in its same form as it was before. It's just not powerful enough. We will get support in the future for Sword Soul, which will make the deck a bit better once again, but we have reached a point at which this deck is so power crapped that it doesn't really make sense anymore to play it. Then we have Fiendsmith, Snake Eyes, Fiendsmith, Asamina, or the new Snake Eyes, Fiendsmith Millennium deck that you can also play, I think, and this I mean, you could definitely argue which of these decks might be the best deck, but I think in the end, Snake Eyes is the best deck because it's so versatile. It's had so many different pushes, so many different options. If you stop one option, they normally have another one, and then maybe a third, and maybe even a fourth, which is crazy. If we are thinking about time, then obviously sometimes the combos can be quite long, and this can be exhausting if you play a lot of Duelist Cup. That is where Tenpai Dragon definitely has an advantage, in my opinion, but from a pure power level, I think this is the best deck right now, and you will most likely see the most success in the Duelist Cup with this deck. Then we have a Voiceless Voice. Honestly, still a solid option, I would say, somewhere here at the top of the mid category, in my opinion. Still very nice into Fuvolos, very nice into Maxi, and this is something that is really important, especially because a lot of people are now on triple Fuvolos, and this deck doesn't really care, and sometimes this Omni Negate can be enough. It's also nice against Tenpai, this big body that is basically protected. So being strong against one of the best decks is definitely something. Then again, if, for example, you play against Snake Eyes Fiendsmith Asamina / Millennium, then most of the time you will probably not have enough to stop this engine with its multiple pushes. Then again, still a good option, Voiceless Voice. And obviously very interesting here, Blue Eyes. Where would I put Blue Eyes? In the future, Blue Eyes will get an additional support with the Primate engine, definitely making the deck stronger, more consistent. The Primate engine works unbelievably well together with the Blue Eyes cards. And we get another very good interruption in the form of the Primer Drill Beam. The grind game will get better. It's just super solid. For now, it's also a strong deck, but I can't really place it in the strong category. I would put it at the top of the mid category. I think you can definitely win games with this deck. This is definitely quite well positioned, but not in comparison to the decks that are stronger or even the best. Then we have Dark World. At this point, I would avoid it. A lot of going second cards, a lot of non-engine cards will definitely stop this deck. If you can achieve the full silver combo, ripping your opponent's hand, it's obviously game, but you will rarely ever achieve this, so I wouldn't go for this deck at the moment. We have Exodia, the Millennium cards. Definitely a strong option, I think, even though I would place it somewhere here at the bottom going first. You can establish this insane like spell trap negate with the entire board wipe. Then again, the best decks can muster up multiple pushes in order to once again establish the board, which is why I think it's a good deck, but can't really compete with the top decks that we have right here. We have this Gandora Ge New Dark Magician deck here, which I definitely would avoid. This is just some anime deck. We have the new Tachyon stuff, which it's nice that we have 7 Tachyon, will be important in the future for Ryziel, but right now I would avoid this deck. I think this is just not really doing enough. I would say take something that is a bit more consistent, like for example Sword Soul, if you want to play any of the avoid decks. Then we have, I'm not even sure how this is called, I forgot it, Ascent, yeah? Ascent has also a board wipe, but one of the decks I would definitely avoid. I think it's kind of more nice than Sword Soul, but not something I would take to the Duelist Cup if you don't have to. We have the Azamina White Forest stuff, which in my opinion is somewhere here at the bottom of the strong category. Can't really place it under Rescue Ace, I have to admit. Maybe I placed Rescue Ace a bit high. Let's put it at the bottom of the strong category. Maybe this is even a mid deck. You could definitely argue about this, but Azamina White Forest not as strong as the other decks that can incorporate the Azamina engine, but still quite solid. Also a lot of push, good support in the future, and for now definitely a strong option. Then we have Drytron, which is at the bottom of the mid category decks. Unfortunately, I think going second this deck just isn't it, and you need some going second capabilities. We have Melodious, which can definitely do some great stuff going first, and in my opinion is a mid deck that I would prefer over some other combo decks that we have here in the mid category. This is my list concerning the Duelist Cup and obviously also the rest of this ladder season. But now I'm very interested in your opinion. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. What is the deck that you are taking to the Duelist Cup, and what do you think are the strongest options? And do you think Blue Eyes I have overrated or underrated? Let me know. And also, if you like my videos, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell. And obviously we will see each other in the next one.